Hey everyone! In this episode of In Conversation, in partnership with the 2024 Dubai ITS World Congress, I am joined by the co-founder and Chief Strategy Officer of See.Sense, Irene McAleese. Anyway, I'm Alistair and this is at ITS Now. ITS Now produces learning resources about ITS which are often used by new entrants into the ITS sector. So it would be really interesting to learn a little about your career background and how you ended up in ITS.
Okay, well, it's actually over 11 years ago now since my husband and I founded See.Sense. We both came from, I suppose, successful corporate careers, and really gave up what we were doing as a passion-led project originally to start working in cycling safety. When we originally launched See.Sense, it was to do with intelligent bike lights. It was a hardware, element, and we were working on the consumer segment. But over time, we really pivoted to do more and more with data and to start working with cities on that. So I think most ITS professionals in the space will have a background, such as civil engineering, transport engineering, etc., urban planning. Maybe they've gone on and done advanced degrees in transportation engineering, etc. For me personally, my day job is really more on the business development, strategy, planning side, and I'm also really interfacing with the cities that are utilising the data that we gather and helping build out a proposition around that and making sure that it's meeting their needs. So my skill set is a little different. I absolutely need to understand the technology. I absolutely need to understand, the business need for what we're doing. So I come at it from a different perspective of having a background in change management and stakeholder management. But yeah, I would say that resources such as the ones that you create are actually critical in helping, people without the traditional background get up to speed quickly and get involved in this really fast evolving area.
Thank you. Well, that's very kind of you to say that. I think actually it is a whole sector where there is so much going on. Actually, there isn't a particular route into ITS. So we embrace people from all sorts of different backgrounds to to add to the richness of what's going on within the sector and bring new perspectives. And I think See.Sense is a great example of that in providing a different route. Initially, obviously, you weren't that interested in the data per se, but it's become more and more. It's become more salient to all sorts of different things. I think it's really interesting to see that journey of how you've gone from your passion project around cycling to actually becoming involved in the whole mobility sector and not just ITS itself. So
yeah, absolutely.
This is we're obviously talking around the World Congress, which is happening in Dubai a bit later in the year, and they have a number of different themes that they're using for the content, and some of those are around urban mobility, innovation in mobility and logistics, clean mobility, and automated mobility. So I wonder, I probably can guess, but which you think are the biggest opportunities for progress over the next decade?
Well, thinking about those themes, I think looking at urban mobility, there's a lot of scope for sort of smart infrastructure, developing, integrating, intelligent traffic signals to support cycling, for example. Real-time route optimization or different things like that. There's more scope, and we've touched on data, but data-driven planning, understanding how to make cities more bike friendly based off the data that we would have, say, on safety on cycling routes, for example. Generally the theme of clean mobility makes me think of, the transition and decarbonisation, of transport and the huge opportunity that e-bikes, can have in that regard. There's a lot of short journeys which are currently done, by car, which could be transitioned onto sort of more cycling and walking, so I think e-bikes have a huge role in that regard as just being very attractive to quite a wide range of people. And so there's definitely that around the clean mobility. In terms of innovation for mobility and logistics, there's a lot of opportunity to optimise those sort of last mile delivery solutions. Again, e-bikes, e-cargo bikes having a role there. There's a lot of opportunity to reduce congestion in the cities and just enhance their overall efficiency as well, because bikes can get around the city quite well. Then probably mobility as a service, leveraging data again to sort of offer more seamless, multimodal transport solutions as well. Within that, there's definitely more scope to get more integration. And I think as well around the automated mobility, probably to a lesser extent for us, but I think that there's still a need for cities to, who are looking for tools that to identify the infrastructure readiness of their roadways, trying to, support deployment of connected vehicles, that they need to have better data about how those roads are currently being used and what's, if there are a lot of cyclists on them or particular hazardous, locations, historically for cyclists, that's something that automated vehicles want to be aware of. So I think that's quite a nice application for our technology in that space. So yeah, there's a lot going on, and a lot of potential over the next decade, and definitely something I see that cycling taking more and more of a role in as cities start to try to make more equitable mode share across those.
Yes, exactly. We've seen in London, as an example, a lot of the street capacity being reapportioned to cyclists and pedestrians and public transport, and the capacity you gain by shutting down traffic lanes is actually quite considerable. People often look at it during the middle of the day and there's nothing on the cycle lanes and there's a long queue of traffic in the single lane, but during peak periods actually those cycle lanes are full up and have got much more density of people in than the vehicular lanes. So I think there isn't one single tool to use. As with anything, there's a variety of different approaches, and actually we need that variety to cater for different issues and different requirements. So it's always good to have that variety in what's happening.
Remember to hit the subscribe button for ITS Now.
I wonder, so you started with cycle safety and have become more and more involved with data, but I wonder what have been some of the biggest surprises around the uses and adoption of your products over the last few years.
I think one of the things that's been very, very interesting to us is, I think when you look at cycling data and really the lack of cycling data that exists in cities, what we've seen really is that, I suppose when you think about data, there's no one silver bullet. There's no one, thing that answers every question possible. And I think what's important that I've seen evolve over time is cities starting to get a bit more sophisticated and saying, look, let's understand the strengths and weaknesses of each different approach and look at how you can make use of those data, understanding that. One of the things we do at See.Sense is we fill what we see as some of the gaps in the existing data. So one of them could be, for example, there's not a lot of data about, even if you look at crowdsourced data, it can be quite skewed to specific groups, like sort of athletes, end of the spectrum, etc. So when we've worked with cities, one of the things they've really sought to do is deploy our devices out to specific groups, so they know that there's women using these devices, or they're cargo bike riders, or they're commuter riders, that they know the pool of people that are contributing the data has been interesting for us to see the emphasis that cities really place on, and the value that they place on that broad representative data. I would say another thing would be just the engagement of the cycling community as well in really wanting to share and participate in this. I suppose it's, from an ITS point of view, it's a bit different to say, let's put a camera on this junction, or let's put let's have automated, counters to feedback data. Cyclists are choosing to have these devices on their bikes, whether it's our bike or our tracker, and that's mostly because they really value the opportunity to help influence the city to create better conditions for cycling, whether that's safer roads, whether that's smoother roads because that we've been able to look at the road surface condition, whether that's potentially more increased likelihood of getting a green light.
Well, this is one area that's a particular passion for me because of my background with traffic signals, traffic systems. We have vast networks of vehicle detection around our cities to track the flow of vehicular traffic around, but the detection used for both cyclists and pedestrians on the whole, not totally, but on the vast majority, is to do with somebody being present at a stop line for a cyclist, or that somebody's pushed a button to cross the road. Using more in-depth data allows intelligence to be applied to understand the flow characteristics of different types of traffic, different modes of traffic. So it's really important to understand that actually, we've got a huge queue of cyclists, a whole peloton of them approaching and flowing downtown or out of town or whatever it is, depending on time of day, and then to actually adjust the traffic signal timings to cater for them as well as for the vehicular traffic, rather than just as a byproduct of that. So yeah, it's really important.
And even if it's not done in real time, still understanding, that historical data that we would build up around the flow and movement of cyclists. So how long does it generally take for cyclists to move through this junction? Where are the delays happening? What's the average speeds? All of that information can be fed into models to help improve the sort of predictive, capability as well. That's quite exciting that even that sort of static data can be used in that way, but also then, potentially the more real-time opportunity as well.
Yes, it's really important because, when you're designing facilities, actually you're looking for these different types of data in order to model how users will use new facilities. So having that would be really, really useful in being able to design an efficient installation and junctions and crossings and things. Do you see, though, that the sort of data that you're producing could be used for other active transport modes as well? So for pedestrians, I think you're doing a bit with micromobility as well. I just wonder how applicable you think these sorts of data streams would be to other active users.
Yeah. So we have done projects working with e-scooters. We participated in a project in London actually working with that, just to show that yes, we can do this on e-scooters as well as bikes. I don't think that a lot of cities are using data from e-scooters in that way at the moment. They tend to be looking at, number of trips or where they went, but I think there's definitely opportunity to grow that in the future. For pedestrians, no, our technology wouldn't work for pedestrians, but what we can do is actually look at the interaction that we see on the road. So where we see significant braking or swerving in heavy pedestrian areas, for example, we could be identifying conflicts. And in some cases, areas in London, for example, that have been pedestrianised, around the bank area of London, which was pedestrianised, for example, that one of the main issues was then not conflicts between cyclists and cars, but conflicts between cyclists and pedestrians, and understanding where that was happening from looking at patterns of swerving and braking could be really useful as well.
So I think that's one of the interesting things. The data set that you're gathering isn't just about they went from here to there and it took this long. You're actually looking at the dynamics of that, those trips, and like you said a bit earlier, can even gather information about the quality of road surfaces, etc.
Yeah, so that's really one of the things that differentiates us at See.Sense. Is it really goes beyond sort of the basic GPS, data that you would get on location and speed. What we're doing for See.Sense is we've got dedicated sensors inside our device that are actually providing this very detailed telemetry data, so to speak. So it's monitoring the environment of the cyclist up to 800 times a second. We're using edge processing and AI on the device to process all of that data in real time. And that's why we get those very granular insights about swerving, braking, and even the quality of the road that they've gone over. And when we say braking, it's really quite granular. So it's kind of what sort of brake did they do? Is it a very harsh brake, or how quickly did they apply the brake? And that's crucial because that's a couple of studies we've done working with Transport for London on their Vision Zero project, for example, and also working with ROSPA in Birmingham. We're actually able to show that those really extreme manoeuvres are actually correlated with the Stats 19 police reports of the historical collision locations. It starts to become okay, so now we're seeing this pattern. We know that there's a relationship between where that extreme swerve and brake manoeuvre happened and a death or a serious injury. So we can start to be proactive in planning, and identifying a hazardous location and putting steps in place.
And that's just brilliant. From a design perspective, actually having an understanding where you need to prioritise to make changes or go and identify what the issues actually are on street. It is fantastic to have that as a resource. Really good. So worldwide, you're now based back in Australia, but I wonder what your insight is into different outlooks about active transport that you've come across.
Yeah, I mean, I would see we've worked now in the UK, also in Ireland. We've done a couple of projects in Europe, and also now we've had did I say the US? We've done our first project in the US, and we've now a couple of projects here in Australia. So yes, definitely starting to get a bit of a global feel. But I would say that in terms of adoption of technologies, I think it's much easier to do where you've got a country that's got a good sort of governmental support for cycling, whether that's through sort of policies and infrastructure investments that they're making in that area, and obviously trying to get more parity, as we talked about before, or understanding that cycling needs to take a more integrated role in the transport system. So once that policy agenda is there, then from an equity point of view, there seems to be, there's more demand and then more resource and budget to fund the kind of work that we would do. So that's important.
I think there's this whole chicken and egg situation, though, isn't there? That facilities are poor, so people don't use them, so they're not invested in. And when you do start to invest in that infrastructure, then you start to see people using them, and then it starts rolling. But it can be difficult, especially for cash-strapped authorities, to.
Well, one of the big sort of demands for our service at the moment is to, I suppose, is to help a lot of cities develop that. So when they, it's actually to justify that first investment that they'll make as well, because political will is so important to keep the investment coming, and you've got to be able to demonstrate the impact of what you've done to get more funding and budget to do more. So having data to show, well, we made the investment in this infrastructure, in this junction, and actually it's improved things.
Yeah, it's a no-brainer, really, isn't it? At the end of the day, when you lay it out like that, actually data is key to all sorts of things, but decision making and policy making, it's just a fantastic opportunity to be able to justify these different expenditures.
Remember to hit subscribe for ITS now. Yeah,
absolutely. And that helps the politicians as well, who've got to kind of sometimes push back a little bit, if you're making a change in a city which is actually going to, involve some reallocation of space to cycling, or to prioritise cycling where maybe other road users feel that their needs are no longer at the top of the hierarchy, then I think Jeanette Sadiq Khan is very interesting in New York. She has a kind of quote which I quite like, is when you push at the status quo, it's going to push back at you. So data is really critical to demonstrate the impact of what you're doing and to help you do more of it.
Yes, yeah, definitely. Yeah. So we talked briefly around your sort of background before, but I think for me it's become more and more apparent that there are lots of people working in sort of tech startups and in mobility who aren't really aware that they're in the ITS sector. And certainly I think when we first talked a year or so ago, you didn't really think that you were in ITS, but I am. So.
I still wouldn't call myself an expert, Alistair.
No, but my core specialisms are, we're all very niche, to be honest. So there's a huge plethora of different specialisms within the whole sector, but I've become more and more of a generalist over the years, but my core specialism is around traffic signals, traffic control. So I know a huge amount about that very small space. But I wonder, how the ITS sector can be more active to engage with tech startups and people sort of around the periphery of the industry. And as someone who's sort of coming into the tent from that, I just wondered if you had any insights about what we should be doing more of to engage with you. Yeah.
Well, I think industry and events and conferences are very good. I think the first ITS conference I went to was in Copenhagen a few years ago. There were only a few presentations on cycling, actually. Most of the conference was on, auto cars and other things. So I went to that. There were it was in Copenhagen that year, and it was interesting to go along. And I felt like this whole sphere was just starting to kind of open up and grow and become more enticing for active travel, which got my interest. So I think conferences are very important. I do think also that organisations, professional organisations like ITS UK, ITS Australia, they put on a lot of good seminars and events, which you don't always have to be a member for originally, that you can start to kind of put your toe in the water and start to learn about this, and maybe realise, like I did, that yes, actually we're doing a lot of this stuff actually with what we do, and then that is really important to make connections as well. You can meet other people working within the industry, which then opens up more opportunity for partnerships and alliances as well. So in a lot of the larger organisations that I see are actually quite hungry to start to collaborate with startups who can bring in innovation, who can bring something new that's actually going to help differentiate their offering. So they need to go back to cities and pitch, their services on traffic optimization or other things. And if they can talk about, hey, we're actually innovating ourselves, we're partnering with innovation and startups that can help us start to look at other modes, that's good for them. So there's opportunity to get involved in those conferences, the workshops, the sort of strategic collaborations. All of that I think is useful. Government can help as well through funding and incentivization. Looking at, startups need to move quickly. We need funding always. So small grants to do demonstrations or things like this to get a foot in the door with a city that they can then we can leverage and grow on is hugely important as well. And then for myself as well, I'm quite involved with professional organisations to do cycling, the Cycling Industry Europe. We recognise that sort of interoperability for data is a huge issue. So looking and the creation of standards is actually going to benefit everybody in the industry. So I like to do my bit as well to, make sure that the cycling industry, we can come together and present, make sure that, we're offering a joined up kind of approach, which is actually going to not only help, an individual startup, but actually help all of us if we can make it easier for cities to start using our data in standardized way. So I would say they're the main things that come to mind.
Yeah, and of course, if there are any startups or anyone wants to come and talk on this channel as well, we're always happy to talk to people. So there's an open invitation for people to get in touch. But I think cycling is a really interesting mode of transport. Over the years it's really democratized mobility. There are a lot of places where the introduction of the safety cycle actually provided a lot of opportunities for people to go further than the edge of their village, or for work, education, etc. Now there are a lot of obstacles around access to different forms of transport for many groups within our society, and I wonder if so we talked about equity earlier, but obviously there is a level of inequity for access to different technologies. I just wonder, I think we talked previously about some schemes to provide more access to active transport schemes that you were aware of.
Yeah, so equity is a huge issue, and I saw something came out of the UK only in last week, where somebody was a survey was saying quite a lot of people they just struggle to even purchase a bike. The cost of a bike can actually be a barrier, and we've got a really exciting project that we're involved with in Essex actually, and it's it's run by Essex County Council in association with the Active Wellbeing Society, which is a charity, and they got funding from Sport England and lots of different places. But it's very interesting because it's up to 2,000 bikes now that they're actually loaning out to people who are living in deprived areas of Essex. They can use the bikes, and we gather data about where they ride the bikes, how often they ride the bikes. That gives the data and evidence to get more funding to do this kind of thing. And on the back of it, they're building out the infrastructure to, sustain it as well longer term. And these are going to places like Clacton and Jaywick, which are, one of the poorest areas in England. And it's really fantastic to see the uptake and use of them. But I also, around the world, you've got this sort of, we talked earlier about e-bikes and the potential for e-bikes. Now, they're more expensive than a regular bike, and there's been huge success around the world with e-bike subsidy schemes. And that's something we want to get more involved with in See.Sense, because we think, well, rather than just subsidising the e-bike, why not subsidise a tracker that can go on that, which not only is going to help the person track their bike in case it's stolen from an individual point of view, but also, provide this fantastic data for the city. Denver, for example, launched their e-bike scheme, and they went out like hotcakes. They had huge uptake, and then you got these sort of series of articles saying, "Wow, we don't have the infrastructure to even cope with the demand for all these cyclists that are going around." And where are they riding?
That's circle again, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. And then also, with e-bikes, understanding, well, what speed do they travel compared to a regular cyclist? And how are people using those e-bikes in the city? And actually, what are the infrastructure requirements based on that? Do we need to widen some of the paths to allow fast cyclists and slow cyclists to exist in a bike lane together? And how do their speeds and dwell times can differ from regular cyclists? So there's a lot of very interesting data and research that can come from that as well. But yeah, I think that will really help help to tackle a lot of the inequity, and so much opportunity is there to reduce, to decarbonise our transport, especially for those smaller journeys or shorter journeys.
Yes, exactly. So one area I'm interested in, we produce a lot of resources for new entrants coming into the industry on ITS now, but I'm interested to know what you think are the biggest areas for growth and career opportunities for younger people. And I know you're not a traditional ITS person, but I think it's interesting to get those insights from people in different segments of what we're doing around mobility.
Well, I mean, what I'm hearing from cities is, sort of, I see in the ITS area, the optimization of traffic to sort of take in new modes is something I think will be a big growth area. As we talked about before, with cities becoming more and more congested, they just can't keep up with, maintain the status quo of having as many cars as we do, and with the growth of bikes, if you've seen what's happening in London and in Paris and some of these cities around the world, it actually, really it is quite a serious thing. You need to start understanding the flow and movement of bikes around the city, so and optimizing their journey, and so many cities are not quite up to really,
the traffic systems, etc. Just the architecture of them, that's not part of what they do. But
it's going to have to evolve.
Yeah. So there are new sort of urban traffic control systems which are coming into the market now with AI built into them, and they'll have capabilities that existing systems just don't have. But you've still got to have that data going into them in order to be able to provide those facilities. And but I think it all aligns with the whole green agenda. Actually greening our streets. Initiatives like Trees for Streets is really good. You can cool the urban environments, and by having more and more green space, actually you make the whole urban environment much more pleasant for people just to take their time about. And
kind of placemaking, really, isn't it? Because one of the big takeaways I got from the last cycling conference that I went over to attend in Ghent was it even, it's not just about making more cycling, it's actually about making the cities more livable for people, and the experience better for people, and moving people around the city more efficiently. And a lot of that is about that greenery, having places that are pleasant and
you can just spend 5 minutes just enjoying it rather than being bustled along by all these cars driving right next to you, etc.
Yeah. And it's interesting because even as shopkeepers and people think, well, if you put a bike lane in, people won't be able to travel to get to me by car. But there's a lot of research even in London which says that retailers find that the spending goes up for when you make the city centre more walkable and bike friendly, because people have time to stop and hop off and explore, rather than whizzing through on the car. So yeah, you're right. There's greenery, and placemaking definitely comes into it in terms of the overall city design. But yeah, I think that there's a load of opportunity in that area for the traffic optimization to be more equitable, and just generally, coming back to the AI, I think there's going to be, that is obviously a growth area, in terms of being able to take the data sources that are there, to be able to use that data to, be able to ingest it and help cities make decisions from that. I think that's the other big growth area as well.
Very good. Anyway, Irene, thank you so much for taking part in our In Conversation series. We've got other people taking part, but it's really good to have your input around cycling. I think it brings a whole fresh perspective to the ITS sector. So thank you so much for what you're doing.
Oh, thank you.
I hope you found that interesting. We've got more episodes of our In Conversation series coming up on the ITS Now channel, official media partner of the 2024 Dubai ITS World Congress. So make sure you don't miss out on any of these insightful episodes we've got lined up for you. So lastly, can I please ask you to subscribe to our channel? It's free, it doesn't cost you anything, but it really does make a huge difference to us, helping to bring more episodes about ITS to you. Thanks again to everyone who's already subscribed. Thanks for watching. See you next time.